further, I'll just introduce Chris Stevens, who's the MP for which part of Glasgow?
Glasgow South West.
Glasgow South West. Okay, so.
Okay, thanks very much, Rose. Thank you. In 5 minutes, I'll do my best, but that usually is the length of time I take to conclude my opening remarks, usually, but I'll do my best. But thanks, Royce, it's always a pleasure to be at the Morning Star Scotland Conference, because that's now the third year in a row that every time there's a Morning Star Conference that weekend, Partick Thistle win. So if we can have a Morning Star Conference every weekend from now till the end of April, I'd be obliged. But thank you, and I want to thank many colleagues who are here, including those in the Labour Party, who've been very kind to me, and their congratulations on me getting elected in May. Because since then, I've become Vice Convener of the PCS Parliamentary Group, Vice Convener of the NUJ Parliamentary Group, and I'm heavily involved in the Unison Parliamentary Group, as well as being the Vice Convener for the All Parliamentary Group on South Africa. In terms of some of the issues, the first issue I want to touch on, which does have an element of class, I think, and it's going to be a bill that's going to be debated when we get back, is the immigration bill. The immigration bill is extremely dangerous in some of the things that have been put forward by the Tory government, in particular removing the right to Section 4 support for those asylum seekers who have had their applications rejected. That can only result, I think, colleagues, in destitution in our streets from asylum seekers, and I think that we need to be careful that we don't allow the right to put asylum seekers and those of us in our communities against each other. If asylum seekers get in a house, or the arguments we've all heard before about asylum seekers getting houses and people not getting houses, we have to steer clear of that argument. The lack of houses is not the fault of asylum seekers. There's a lack of housing because there's a lack of housing. And housing is an issue which we need to deal with, and I think that over the next few months, I think that all political parties have a responsibility to look at that very serious issue. Those who are coming into this country seeking sanctuary are our fellow human beings, and we have a responsibility to look after them. The next issue I want to touch on, obviously, is the Trade Union Bill, because I, along with my colleague Lisa Cameron, will be on the Trade Union Bill Committee. And as I said in my speech in the debate, I'm not afraid and I'm not ashamed to be a trade unionist. The trade union movement gave me an education and confidence to stand for election, and I'll always be grateful to the trade union movement for that. And I want to assure everyone here, there is no deals to be done on the political fund, no deals at all, because it's not about funding a particular political party, it's about the trade union movement using those political funds for its general campaigning to stand up against austerity and to represent workers, to campaign and give money to organisations like, for example, Hope Not Hate, campaigning for 50-50 gender representation across the board. All of these issues are important, and there will be no deal done on political funds, because it's the right of the trade union and the trade union membership to determine what the funding arrangements are in that trade union. And as I have said to many people who have said to me, party colleagues, well, surely we have to discuss this, I've said no, because it's up to the trade union membership. If you don't like the funding arrangements that a trade union is going through at the moment, your job's to change it, and your job's to go into the trade union movement and argue for those changes. The Trade Union Bill is a piece of legislation, I was saying in the earlier session that Ross chaired. There is not one piece of that bill you could actually say is sensible, and there's not one piece of that bill you can agree with. But we're actually talking in there about the social media aspects of the bill, where they're going to try and curtail the social media aspects of it. We're now going to call it secondary tweeting. That's what we've decided to call it, because that's what it is. And it is about stopping the trade union movement being the largest group in civic society who stands up against exploitation. That's what this is about, is to stop the trade union movement's capacity to do that. And also we have to be clear, I think, because I am slightly concerned about some of the comments we've heard from some trade union leaders, not all, about thresholds being up for negotiation. I think thresholds are extremely dangerous in terms of stopping the capacity of workers to go on strike, especially when there's gender equality issues involved in that, because we can see when there's shift changes in the workplace and all the rest of it. And I think that there is very real concerns in relation to how this will affect young workers. Because I think that the trade union movement has a real capacity to increase membership across the board for young workers, particularly in relation to the new minimum wage, and I'll keep calling it the minimum wage because that's what it is, and that the minimum wage is only going to be paid to those who are over 25. So there's those issues. We have some capacity when we go back to Parliament to talk to the Scotland Bill. We've been lobbied very heavily by Phil's colleagues in the RMT in relation to railways, and I will be putting forward a new clause when we get to the third reading of the Scotland Bill to make sure that the Scottish Government has a capacity, or any Scottish Government has a capacity, to bring railways into public ownership. One of the other issues I think which is certainly class-based is the Tory Government's attitude towards welfare and social security, in particular the sanctions regime that we know is alive and well. And I can tell you from the cases that I deal with, the attitude towards those on social security is frankly despicable, and I think that we have a responsibility to oppose any of the Tories' changes to welfare. And in fact, what I thought was interesting, and I know Neil's next and Neil can maybe touch on this, I thought that Jeremy Corbyn's campaign really kicked off when Labour MPs abstained in the welfare bill, because the anger that I had, and I've got many friends in the Labour Party, the anger of the rank and file Labour Party membership on those issues was alive and well, and I think that that's what took off. Another issue I think that we need to talk about is jobs and increasing manufacturing. One of the organisations that I'm involved in Parliament is the Industrial Communities Alliance. And looking at what has happened with the deindustrialisation of so many of our communities, I think that that's a very real issue. And just to give you an example, the constituency that I represent, the shipyards are no longer the largest employer. Shipyards employ 2,700. Silverburn employs 3,000. And that will only result, if we're relying on the retail sector only, that will only result in a low wage and low reward economy. And I think that that is something that we really need to take on and discuss. And the last issue, is, of course, is the economy. Because the irony, of course, is that we have a Tory government who like to deregulate everything, except the trade union movement, of course, because the trade union movement is to be subjected to heavy regulation, is to take on that argument about the deregulated economy. We need real regulation in the economy, that there is a role of the state, and we need to talk up the role of public services. I think that people agree that most people in town do a good job and a strong economy and helping the less fortunate. And I thank you again for taking the time to listen. Thank you.
In terms of timing, Chris. So,
Thank you.
We'll move on now to Neil Finlay, MSP.
Thanks very much, Ros, and as always it's a pleasure to be here. These are always one of the best conferences of the year because we always have good, intelligent and non-sectarian debate, and I'm sure it will be the same today. The issue we were asked to discuss was the key class issues of today, and of course the key class issues of today are the same as they've always been, and that's the class division itself, and that division between those who have power, who have wealth, who have access, who have influence to decision making, and the rest of us. And it's been most recently explained in the 1% against the 99, a very simplistic way of explaining it, but I think quite effective. And of course class defines everything in our life. On the one hand, we see at the moment wages falling as a percentage of our GDP. 5.3 million people paid less than the living wage, almost 500,000 in Scotland. 700,000 on 0 hours contracts and 13 million in the UK below the poverty line. And at the top, we see the top 1% having the same wealth as the bottom 55%. Utter obscenity that we see in terms of inequality. Living standards falling for workers at a faster rate than at any time since the 19th century. The 1,000 richest people saw their wealth increase by 15% to £519 billion. £519 billion. And This is an often quoted phrase or statement, but it comes from an unexpected source who says, "There is a class war going on and my class are winning, but they shouldn't." And that came from Warren Buffett, one of the world's most wealthiest speculators, explaining exactly what is going on. And we see it every day in our communities. We see that inequality in so many ways, where in the paper last week it was talking about some people taking their kids, an 11-year-old boy taking his friends, flying them to Disneyland for his 11th birthday party, whilst at the same time we have 11-year-olds queuing up at food banks with their family just to eat. That's the divide in our society. For young people, we see underemployment, unemployment, college places cut, bursaries cut, student debt rising. And we hear about welfare reform. Let's stop calling it welfare reform, let's call it what it is. It's social security cuts. That's what it is. And it's taken from the disabled and the vulnerable and the poor. And that's in the belief that if you make people destitute, it'll just make them get a job, instead of addressing the fundamental problem, which is the lack of decent jobs in the economy in the first place. And how is it that we need to cut benefits for people to incentivise work, but for investment bankers and chief executives, we have to give them bonuses to incentivise them? Why does it only work one way for them? In health, we see life expectancy gap growing for people. The length of time you have a healthy life in the least deprived areas, 69 years of a healthy life, 48 in the most deprived areas. That is a scandal and an embarrassment in our society. And tax cuts for the rich and tax credit cuts for people at work. So that social and economic disadvantage is, I think, the big class issue today, but it's the same class issue that we had last year, last decade and last century. And if we look at other issues, we have war and conflict across the globe, which again is a class issue. The victims of war tend to be the poorest and most vulnerable people, just as the people who are shooting each other or bombing each other tend to be the poorest and most vulnerable people. And we only need to look to what's happening in Syria and across Europe to see that happening. And it will be the same with things like climate change. It will be the wealthiest people will be able to move away from areas that are affected by flooding or desertification or any other climate change impact, and the poorest people will become refugees and they will be caught up as victims of famine. Closer to home, the Trade Union Bill has dominated our discussions today, and rightly so, and it is quite simply the greatest attack on the organised labour movement, organised working class for a long time. Check off the right to strike, basic rights at work, basic fundamental rights that we thought were enshrined in our human rights being taken away from us, and we must resist that at all costs. And I will work hand in glove with Chris and his party and any other party, I don't care who they are, because the stakes are so high on this one. And I'm delighted that Labour councils have led the way, led by Glasgow City Council, saying that there will be a non-cooperation strategy in taking on this bill. And Labour councils in Fife and in West Lothian and Renfrewshire and across Scotland have done the same. And I hope Chris will be able to use his influence to get every SNP council across the country to follow suit, and the Scottish Government. The Welsh First Minister has said very clearly there will be a non-cooperation policy. We have not heard that from the Scottish Government, and I plead with Chris to get to do exactly that. We also should insist that there is a legislative consent motion comes before the Scottish Parliament on that bill. That will allow the Scottish Parliament to vote down that legislative consent motion, and then we'll be into a constitutional wrangle. So let's see if we can get the Scottish Government and councils of other persuasions to line up with Labour councils on that, and I hope they will. I want to just read something to you. I've been conducting for the last year, 18 months, Tommy Kane, who works for me, has been doing most of the research on it, but we've been doing a review of health inequality in Scotland. You could fill this room 20 times over with the reports that have been written on health inequalities in Scotland, and yet bugger all seems to happen because we just get more or equal. Our review has been looking at policies that will actually start to impact on that. And one of the things they did was they went round the country speaking to groups of people. And this is a group of people, I'll not say where the community is, but this was young people who told us this. This was not professionals, this was them in their own words. It's very powerful, very moving and extremely disturbing. It says, at a meeting we attended in, I will not name the community, we had stark evidence of what health inequality meant for the people living and working there. They described a community with multiple issues that contribute to health inequality, but identified poverty as the root cause. They outlined how community workers observed the tangible humiliation and shame felt by growing numbers of people compelled to source their food from food banks, where gaunt and malnourished faces of mothers is common, particularly those who feed their children before feeding themselves. Where too often people face continual barriers to accessing diminishing local services, where it's the community themselves setting up much needed services, where poor uninsulated housing is common, and where the ghettoisation of once thriving social housing schemes is routine. Now this goes on, because that first passage for me was bad enough. The impact on our young people is nothing short of tragic. The contributors to our meeting spoke of the difficulties facing them. How young people are ostracised and moved on by the police, but with nowhere and no recreational services to go to. The minimal employment opportunities available to young people, where the work that is available is characterised by low pay, 0 hours and insecurity. Where welfare cuts have sapped the confidence of young people so affected by the constant rejection from jobs that don't exist. Such that they give up looking and are sanctioned as a result. Where stress and mental health issues are going through the roof, yet mental health service provision for young people is abysmal. Sometimes waiting 2 years for a psychiatric appointment, and suicide is increasing. The consequence is that people have a greyness about them, a deflatedness, a hopelessness and a helplessness. Now, if that doesn't shock you, then I don't think you should be here. I can't, every time I read that, I get more and more disturbed. And we sit here and we're supposed to celebrate the fact that we have a council tax freeze. It is a disgrace what is happening in communities like that. And that is the reality of it. And if we don't, as my political party or any other political party, face up to the realities of that, then we should not be anywhere near politics and no one's or in power or in government or in local government. That's the reality of the world that people are living in Scotland now. And that's what we have to face up to. And I think there's some very serious questions for my own political party, but certainly others across Scotland at the moment. I can also say there's another big class issue coming. And it's coming for us all, and we have to face up to it, and that's the EU referendum. Because I think for many people, they think the EU is a land of milk and honey, everything the EU does is great, and there's this impression being given by Scottish Government in particular, that Scotland is such a pro-EU country, and that wouldn't it be a disgrace that if in the EU referendum the UK or England voted to leave and Scotland wanted to stay, and that would mean that there's going to be another referendum. Well, I've asked this question several times and I've never had the answer. What happens if Scotland votes to leave and England votes to stay? What happens then? Because there's a difference between being pro-European and pro-EU. Big difference. We're all, I think we would all say we were internationalist in our outlook. That's the traditions of our movement. We've never been anything other than that. But yet there's a belief, an arrogant belief, that everyone in Scotland, when they get handed a ballot paper next year in that EU referendum, is going to run out celebrating with blue flags with yellow stars in it and say we want to stay in the EU. I'm not quite so sure about that. And whether people, I don't know what position people in here take. You're perfectly entitled to your own position. But anyone on the left of politics who thinks that that situation in Greece that we saw over the last while was acceptable, and any democratic institution, I think, has to question themselves. Because what you saw was, in the very cradle of democracy, the country that brought us democracy, a left government, whatever you think of them, a left government elected and brought down by unelected bankers and institutions representing multinational companies. And not a whimper, not a word from any European government. Not a word. If that had been in another country, in another state, they would be calling the shots and saying it was anti-democratic and lining up the forces against it. And we sat there and did nothing. That is something that's going to come to all of us over the next while. And it's a debate that the left's going to have with each other, but we're also going to have with the country. Thanks.
Thanks.